A very warm welcome to my students and esteemed listeners. Today's topic is women in the labor market, and this topic is going to be based in the Indian context. Before I start with my lecture, I would like to start with three very important and disturbing facts. Number one, according to United Nations Gender Statistics, women's participation in the labor force in 1991 was 33.7%, but in 2012, it has become 27%. Second, according to World Economic Forum's report, India, out of 136 countries, ranks in 124 in terms of women's participation in labor force. Thirdly, according to Oxfam report entitled The G20 and Gender Equality, India ranks the second lowest out of G20 economies in terms of women's participation in the labor force. Out of these three disturbing facts, it's quite clear that women's participation in the labor force is something which is very disturbing and problematic for us. And we need a very sincere approach to understand this topic for lecture. Before I start with my lecture, I would like to explore two important objectives through this. Number one, why should we at all study women and labor in political science? Because the relationship between women and work sounds a bit economic. Then, what is the need for studying this topic in political science? The objective of this lecture is to explore the political dimension and the functioning of politics behind women's work in labor market in India. Number two, through this lecture, we will try to address the issues of discriminations against women in labor market. And we will also try to explore the gendered and political dimensions of women's participation in labor market. So, these are the objectives of this lecture. Before I start with my lecture, I would like to explain the structure of this lecture. After these objectives, I would start with a puzzle. And the puzzle is why women workers are different from men. And in this puzzle, we would like to explore different gender dimensions which are functioning against women's work. Number two, we will also try to explore the nature of women's work in India. And in this segment, we will try to understand different challenges working behind women's participation in labor force and influencing women's participation in work and other institutions. And number three, we will try to explain the role of the state, the role of the Indian state in facilitating women's work in labor market. In the study of political science, if we do not understand the role of the state, then our discussion will remain incomplete. So, let's start with our first puzzle. Why women workers are different or considered to be different than men? The answer is that the role of patriarchy in labor institutions and women's work. The first question is, what is patriarchy? By patriarchy, we understand an institutionalized system of male dominance, which is very much prevalent in every spheres of our life and impacts women's mobility, choices, desires, including their participation in work. Therefore, women constitute a separate category from men, not because of their biological factors or features, but because of control and authority exercised over their choices, labor, and work by patriarchal institutions and forces. It is very important to point out that patriarchy plays very important role in controlling women's work. In many cases, women do not get proper opportunities, amenities, and conditions to work, even to bargain and negotiate with their working conditions. Therefore, it is very important to keep in mind that the relationship between women and work is not only mediated by the institutions of labor or the institutions of market, but also it has been mediated by patriarchal forces, which is starting from family and ending at state and market. Therefore, the role of patriarchy is very important to understand women's role in labor as well as women's role in our society. So, the first puzzle and the answer of the puzzle is that women's work and women workers are different because they are working under patriarchal institutions. It is also important to mention that when discussing women's work under patriarchy, it is very important to understand the notion of sexual division of labor. Actually, this notion of sexual division of labor is playing an important role in shaping women's participation in labor force. What is the sexual division of labor? The meaning of sexual division of labor is that women and their roles are segregated, and men and women, they have separate roles to perform. It is considered that women should confine their activities and themselves to home or the private, and men should go out, work, and men always should play an important role in the public. Therefore, whenever we talk about women and work, whenever we talk about women's role in labor market, we need to understand that we are basically challenging this sexual division of labor, and that is why the entire discussion on women's role in labor market is not only economic but very much political in the study of political science. Women's participation in labor institutions, including market, under patriarchal forces are subjected to few important features. Number one, under this patriarchal authority, there has been a control over women's work, sexuality, choices, and their aspirations to go out. Number two, women themselves are subjected to different types of discriminations because they also believe in the principle of self-regulation. So women, they themselves control their choices, demands, and aspirations for work. Number three, very important, women's work in patriarchy is also subjected to the notion of unpaid work. Therefore, it means that many of women's work is not paid properly. And the most important feature of women's participation in labor force under patriarchy is the notion of flexibility. Many women function in their family, in their homes, and many of their work has been considered to be an extension of their domestic work. Therefore, they are multitaskers and they are flexible in their approach. But many times their work is not recognized, their contribution in society is sidelined. Therefore, it is very important to highlight that women's work in labor market, women's participation in labor market is political because it is very much structured by patriarchy, it is very much structured by the state, and at the same time, in spite of participating in the labor force, in spite of contributing in society, in spite of playing an important role, their contribution is not recognized many times in our economy. Therefore, the entire issue of women's work is not only economic but very much political in nature. And in the study of political science, we have to address this particular topic from this perspective. this was our first puzzle, that why women workers are different from men. And the reason or the answer of the puzzle is that they are different not because of their biological characteristics, but because of the control exercised over them by patriarchy. And by patriarchy, we understand the system of male dominance in every sphere of society. And what we need to keep in mind, that the labor market, which sometimes seems to be extremely liberal and based on free competition, based on free demand for resources and work, is not beyond the functioning of patriarchy. And women are subjected to this functioning of patriarchy. Now, we are going to start with our second segment, and this segment is basically all about understanding the nature of women's work in India. Before we start with the nature of women's work in India, it is important to understand for us that women do not constitute a homogeneous category. Women's experiences differ on the basis of their location in class, community, religion, etc. Therefore, there is no doubt that few women are coming out. They are establishing themselves as doctors, lawyers, professionals, and IAS, IPS officers, and also playing very important role in organized sector. But what we need to keep in mind that there is a large chunk of women workers who are lagging behind and whose work is not at all recognized in our economy. Therefore, before we start with the nature of women's work, it is important to understand that women do not constitute a homogeneous category. Their experiences in labor market, their experiences in labor institutions differ on various issues. For example, the experience of a woman entrepreneur cannot be similar of women who are working as agricultural laborer in the field. So this is very important to understand. Basically, very important for understanding the nature of women's work in India. Before we start with the nature of women's work in India, again, I would like to start with International Labour Organization's report, which is known as Global Employment Trends 2013. It shows that women's participation in labor force in 2004 and 5 was 39%, and it has become 27% in 2009 and 10. So it shows that there has been a steady decrease in women's participation in labor force. But it is also important to point out that I am not trying to homogenize the situation. There has been an increase in women's work in different spheres after 1990s, but at the same time, it is our duty to understand those reasons which are functioning behind women's lack of participation in labor force. So now we would start with these reasons. Number one, invisibility of women's worker in our economy, data and statistics. Generally, our data and statistics say that women and their participation in labor force is decreasing. But we need to keep in mind that this invisibility is political, this invisibility is constructed. Now, the question is why women workers are invisible in our economy, in our data, in our statistics. There are two reasons behind it. Number one, the way we define the nature of work itself is not at all gender sensitive. What is the definition of work for us? According to census and NSS, National Sample Survey, according to them, work is economically productive activity of physical and mental nature, and it has to lead to production of goods and services which is marketable. At the same time, the worker should get remuneration from his or her work. So this definition is the definition of work. At the same time, the notion of time is very important in the definition of work, that a worker should invest a particular time or hours in every day or week, and then that will constitute the definition of work. And this definition is not enough gender sensitive. Why? Because this definition cannot distinguish women's reproduction and domestic work from economically productive activities. In our country, especially in rural areas, many of women's work is extension of their domestic work. Let me give few examples. Many women in rural India are involved in agricultural activities. They function as temporary agricultural laborers. Many of our women, they spend lot of time, invest lot of time in collecting fuels from the forest. They go far distant places for collecting water. Even a large chunk of women, they are involved in informal sectors which is always without recognition, rights and entitlements. So the main point behind my argument is that in rural India and many parts of India, women's work is basically temporary, sporadic, seasonal when it comes to agriculture, and at the same time without recognition. Our data and statistics cannot explore this nature of women's work in Indian society, mainly rural society. Therefore, what we need to understand that women's work is different and the nature of women's work is different from men's work. This point itself involves two very important issues. Number one, the issue of unpaid work for women, and number two, the role of women as caregivers. What is unpaid work? Women generally are not getting paid for many of their work, which is an extension of their domestic work. For example, women who are housewives, they do not get any remuneration for their work. Women who are involved in caregiving, they do not get any remuneration for their work. Therefore, in today's world, women's role as caregivers is very important. But the point is that this role of caregivers blurs the distinction between paid and unpaid work. Paid work is related to the formal work, and unpaid caregiving work is never considered in this formal paid work. So what we need to understand that women's work is always related to several factors like gender, the nature of work they are doing, their location, whether they are located in urban, semi-urban or rural areas, etc. So these are few factors which make women invisible in our data, statistics and economy. Number two, women are lagging behind in employment and work because of lack of education. The state should play an important role to ensure women's education in our society. Unless women are getting educated, they cannot take part in labor force. Number three, very important factor for women's lack of participation in labor force is lack of rights to property and land rights. In our society, women hardly get the opportunity to possess rights. Generally, without rights, it is very difficult for women to emerge as entrepreneurs or to do something on their own. But the society, our families, in many cases, do not grant women their right to property and land rights. In this case, the work of Veena Agarwal is very important because the famous economist Veena Agarwal has pointed out that unless women are given their rights to property, they won't be able to develop something on their own, and it would be very difficult for them to emerge as entrepreneurs. So it is extremely important for them to have property rights, to develop their credibility, to develop their resources in the market. And the most important reason, as well as challenge behind women's work, is the nature of sexual division of work and different types of gender discriminations in the labor market. Women also face different types of gender discriminations in the labor market because of their sexuality and because of their identity. Till now, we are not very much familiar with women taxi drivers in our society. Some way, it is also related to women's identity, sexuality, and not to their capability and skill. So, these are few important challenges which are working behind women's lack of participation in our labor market. And from this discussion, it is quite clear that understanding the notion of women's work in the labor market is not at all easy because the topic itself has different layers and nuances. Now, I am coming to my third segment, and it is about the role of the Indian state. In the study of political science and gender studies, the role of state is integral, and in our study of women and work, the role of state is very important. Now the question is why? Because the state is responsible for guaranteeing women's rights and liberty, not only for their development of personality, but also for their development in the labor market. The state has always tried to ensure women's right to education and women's other civil and legal rights. In 1976, the state has ensured equal remuneration for men and women, and it has played a very significant role in ensuring women's economic rights in labor market. The state has other roles to play. And what are these roles? The state should play a very important role in developing the notion of gender mainstreaming. What is this gender mainstreaming? It means that states' policies and programs have to be gender sensitive, and the state has to ensure that women get the proper condition to involve themselves in labor market. Therefore, the state has to be gender sensitive, and the state should take an initiative to introduce the notion of gender mainstreaming in our planning and in our economic development. Apart from this, state's role is very significant because through state we can have our planning of economy. It has been considered that our 11th plan is the most successful plan for women. Why? Because our 11th plan has considered women as the agents of socio-economic changes, and women are responsible for the development of society. Therefore, 11th plan has played very important role in introducing the notion of gender mainstreaming, at the same time the notion of socio-economic and political empowerment. It is also important to mention that the role of the state becomes very important because the state has to ensure women's rights in informal and unorganized sectors. It is the state which needs to ensure women's right to pension, childcare, health, and other important opportunities. The state has to ensure that women can participate in labor market without any kind of discrimination, without any kind of harassment. And in today's contemporary times, we cannot ignore the role of the state in combating burning issues like sexual harassment, because the notion of sexual harassment is equally important for women's work, and sometimes it has become very significant for preventing women's participation in labor force. Therefore, in the study of political science, we cannot ignore the role of the state, because today the state is providing different types of models for women's economic empowerment. For example, we can talk about self-help groups where women are coming together and participating in labor force through their skills development, and at the same time, it is the state which can play an important role in giving resources, in ensuring resources to women and giving more opportunities for credit and loans to women. So the role of the state at the end of the day becomes very significant, because this institution plays the most significant role in ensuring women's rights, proper condition, environment which facilitates women's participation in the labor force. Therefore, it is quite clear that women's work in society and labor institutions is subjected to different types of factors. We are starting from labor market, but at the end of the day, it is quite clear that it is the state, family, and our society that plays most important role in shaping women's choices, women's aspirations, and women's desires in the labor market. And what we need to keep in mind that all women are workers, whether recognized or not recognized, because all women participate in production as well as in reproduction. Therefore, women's work is a broad area, and we need to have a more sensitive approach to understand this notion of women's work in India.